In Uganda, mental health is something that of recent, there's also so much stigma associated with not only mental illness, but even those in the field of mental health. It's the most underfinanced in the health field. The way the system has been designed, Uganda only recognizes psychiatrists per se. We don't even have 50 psychiatrists in Uganda. People are only beginning to learn more about psychology services, psychotherapy. There's still stigma. The government needs to step up. Services are getting better and better, but only to to a select group of people, middle class and up.
So, a very warm welcome to the Flourishing Minds Fund podcast. My name is Chris Underhill, and I'm your host. I'm a social entrepreneur in the field of well-being and global mental health. It's my pleasure today to welcome Rosco Kasujja. He's the head of Department of Mental Health and Community Psychology, School of Psychology, Makerere University College of Humanities and Social Sciences, sometimes familiarly known as CHUSS, C-H-U-S-S. Warm welcome, Rosco.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me on your podcast.
No, it's really good. Obviously, I want to talk about your work in mental health at the university, and then go on to discuss other work that you also do in the mental health field, notably with the international NGO StrongMinds. But before we do that, I'd love to know a bit more about you and what brought you into this whole world of mental health in the first place. Do tell me a little bit about your background and family and so on.
Right. Wow. You've just literally made me think about my own family. So my mom's last born.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had 4 kids. One died early, and she raised us one girl and 3 boys. My dad, on the other side, had over 29 kids with 7 wives.
Goodness me.
But I was raised by my mom, and so I never experienced all the other kids on the other side. But it was always a happy house, and I grew up like any other kid, went to school, and so when I was 18, I had an opportunity to join uni.
Right.
And, I would never tell you that I knew anything about psychology. So I grew up just like any other kid, and in Uganda, we didn't really have any psychologists to think about or to talk about. So,
Mm.
but we knew about traditional healers because you wouldn't move for maybe 2 kilometers. I was in the city, but there were traditional healers. We knew
Right.
about them. So whenever I joined uni, I wouldn't tell you that I chose psychology. Actually, it was offered to me as one of the subjects
I
that
see.
I
How
had to.
interesting.
Yeah, so I had 3 subjects. I had gender, I had social administration, and then psychology as 3 subjects. And but what really happened? So growing up as a child, my mom's brother and a few people in the neighborhood, they're the ones that exposed me to mental health and mental illness.
Okay.
My mom's brother, for as long as I could remember, he was unstable. So he would visit and at most spend a night, but then he would be gone. But we knew that he had, a mental illness that no one would tell us what it was.
Right.
So that didn't really register for me until one of a childhood friend, I would say, in the neighborhood right next to our house,
Hmm.
started experiencing some illness. She had lows and then she had highs. The highs were not so much of a problem because she'd be energetic, she'd be happy, she would run away from home and, she would be trouble. So we
Hmm.
thought she's becoming naughty because she's a teenager. But the lows, which later on I came to understand as depression, these really were horrible because she would be silent and she wouldn't leave the house. She was really in a very bad place, and she struggled for a very long period of time. I was very close to her because I think I was a year older than she was, so we were close.
Mm.
And what really happened was whenever I was going to uni, she was just getting worse. I will tell you for a fact, her family moved all over the country to
Right.
try and find help for her.
Right.
And it just wasn't working. She really, really struggled. And what I remember, I had to go and join uni. So whenever I went to Makerere, she wasn't able to do all that. She was behind, on her school and, schoolwork and stuff like that. But then one day I received a message from my brother and he told me that, she had died.
Oh my God.
She set herself on fire.
Oh gosh.
And, and of course, as a 19-year-old, this
Yeah.
was devastating. I never thought this could happen. And, some people were saying she had committed suicide. Others said it was an accident. She had lit the gas and then forgot she was looking for a matchstick. Upon returning, the gas had spread. So there all sorts of things. But what I'll tell you is, as a 19-year-old, this was devastating.
Mm. Mm.
I experienced depression for the first time in my life because I was in a very dark place. I was so sad. I think I was also very anxious because it was the first time for me to really experience someone close to me, very young, dying.
Yes.
And I was in a very dark place.
Right.
And I failed so many classes at the time. No one knew what was happening to me because I was at university, but I know that word went back home that I wasn't doing well, and my mom was insisting I go back home. So I had to go and see a psychiatrist at the university hospital. And, I was given some antidepressants, and I'm glad that I got out of that. But for me, the reason that's why I'm telling you this story is to connect it to psychology because I was having 3 course units. And whenever I would attend the gender classes, it wasn't helpful. And whenever I would go to psychology classes and they would talk about psychological disorders, they would talk about that. And the assignments that I got, that led me to reading more and more. I was greedy for
Yes.
knowledge. I just wanted to understand not only what happened to me, but
Mm.
also what happened to my friend who died. And so I had a choice between doing counseling psychology and clinical psychology. And I chose clinical psychology because I think it had more depth at the time in terms of diving into the psychological disorders. And that's when I realized, oh, she had bipolar and she'd experience depression and she would go into this and no one helped her. So I remember something horrible that happened to her. I think when she was in a manic phase,
Mm-hmm.
she got raped by a group of men. And when that happened, I think she got pregnant and the parents never wanted her to do that. Then they went for an abortion and she almost died because she was hospitalized for more than 4 months. That
Right.
was really bad. So, to cut the long story short, is that I went through all that, educated myself, became a professional psychologist, and Makerere hired me. So the good part about this story is that my my friend's younger brother, a few years when I had qualified as a psychologist, joined on the bachelor's course that we'll talk about, and he broke down in his final year with bipolar.
Oh my God.
And I had an amazing opportunity to work with him and support him and he successfully completed the program because I was faculty in the program. And he had to do his exams and he bounced back. Up to today, he's all right, he's stable, he knows what he needs to do. And my interpretation of that is I had a second chance in this life to
Yes.
serve someone close to me.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a journey, Roscoe. And in your young adulthood, what a journey to undergo. and how amazing that you ended up recognizing that psychology was where you needed to be, and that you had the opportunity to study it and then to become a clinician in it. That's incredible. And what I wanted to do next was just to ask you to take us to the university courses that you are responsible for, that you are associated with. That would be wonderful. But I wonder if you could just take a brief step back and just give us a thumbnail sketch of sort of the mental health situation in Uganda. In other words, the way in which mental health is dealt with in Uganda as a country. Just very briefly, if you don't mind.
Right. So in Uganda, mental health, and I always love to tell people that in Uganda, mental health is something that of recent, especially as a result of the pandemic, it's got people talking, but there's also so much stigma associated with not only mental illness, but even those who are in the field of mental health. It's the most underfinanced in the health field. And the way the system has been designed, Uganda only recognizes psychiatrists per se. They talk about other players, but most of the structures within the public health system are filled by psychiatrists who are not even, we don't even have 50 psychiatrists in Uganda. We don't have 50 yet.
How many do you have? Did you say 50 or under 50?
We have less than 50 in the entire country. So, but the way it is that people are only beginning to learn more about psychology services, psychotherapy, and there's still stigma when someone is diagnosed with a mental illness. They could lose their work. They won't say that we are firing you because of mental illness, but you could lose your work, confidence, and so the government needs to step up. We're not in a good place. Professionals more and more are getting trained, and the services are getting better and better, but only to a select group of people, middle class and up, upwards. So yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful to have that background. Now here we are. You are at the university. You are running and responsible for the mental health department, as I understand it. Maybe you could just tell us the courses that you run at the university.
So the Department of Mental Health, the chair too, has about 4 programs. I'd love to also say that the bachelor's program that used to be solely in the Department of Mental Health, that was the bachelor's in community psychology, has now been phased out, and we now have one joint undergraduate program called Bachelor's of Applied Psychology. But whoever pursues that program has a chance to specialize and major in community psychology when they get to their second year. And then we have about 3 graduate programs. One is a Master of Science, clinical psychology, and then we have the Masters of Counseling Psychology, and then a postgraduate diploma in counseling and guidance. And what the postgraduate diploma does is it gives an opportunity to those individuals who didn't do any psychology at undergrad to test the waters, and we find out if they can now transition to the field of psychology. So it's a 9 months program, and usually people who come outside the field of psychology, we reroute them to that program and see how they do, and they can now do a master's in either clinical or counseling psychology. So those are the 3 programs, and each program has a coordinator for it. To make sure that it's well run, and everything, the day-to-day running and stuff like that within the department is smooth. Yeah.
And if you were if we imagine a kind of typical student beginning to think about what course they should do, what's the distinction that they should make between one program and another? You've already told us about the masters in counseling and so on, so that's clear, and that would help. That would be particularly useful for a student who didn't have psychology and their background. But what about the others? Just give us a kind of sense of how the student would think about each of the courses.
So that's a good question. So what typically happens is that the clinical psychology, the master's in clinical psychology is a little bit complex and very intense. I mean, all programs are intense, but we always want to make sure that anyone who goes to pursue a master's of science in clinical psychology has a thorough background in psychology or a science-based course. Because it becomes really difficult for someone who minored in psychology, because everything happens so fast on the Masters of Science in Clinical Psychology. So usually we admit individuals who have done a bachelor's in psychology, have a science background, or someone who has done a medical degree and they want to do a master's in psychology. The people who are grounded in science and are strong in psychology, usually, in fact, the university used to advertise the program for people mainly with a science background. But with a master's of arts in master's in counseling psychology, typically we have courses like social work, courses like education, courses where someone has taken a course unit or two in psychology, then later on they realize, oh, I want to do something in the field of mental health. Usually that's a soft landing, not to say that it's an easy course, because we also have people who majored in psychology, they have a background in science, and they choose to go into counseling psychology. The two courses are a little bit different because especially the way they're developed and the build-up in such a way that the clinical psychology students typically are exposed to practicum fields or sites where they dive deep into, psychopathology or psychological disorders. And as students go to Butabika, they go to different hospitals around the country and they can go to, different places and they're expected to just adapt. Whereas with counseling psychology students in the past, it wasn't really the case, but now the gap is narrowing and, they're catching up with the intensity.
Yes, you mentioned Butabika. That, of course, is the tertiary hospital in Uganda, isn't it? It's
Yes.
The main
medical.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, from what you told me earlier, I imagine it's relatively difficult for a student to get a job in psychology or in clinical psychology after they leave. Is that true or not, or have I misunderstood that?
I wouldn't say it's difficult. I wouldn't say it's so easy because almost all our students who do clinical psychology, before they even complete and graduate, they have jobs.
Oh, wow.
And the ones who are doing counseling, they also have, avenues, they also get jobs. So it's very difficult to find, they might struggle at the beginning, or getting a permanent job like a tenured contract here and there, but there's so much work that they're invited to do. So I wouldn't say it's so easy, but I wouldn't say they struggle too much because, for example, most of our students at the moment who do a master's in clinical psychology, they get taken, because the humanitarian setting, Uganda hosts most of the refugees in Africa, and NGOs there always write to me and they say, send us students, send us students. So I would say because of that and, other opportunities that come, it depends on if someone wants to specialize in research or psychological testing or clinical work. So I would say it's not so difficult. There's always,
And that's very good to know, and I'm sure it would be encouraging for young people as they come and think about the courses that you're offering. You're talking about international NGOs gives me a perfect excuse to talk to you about other work that you are associated with. Now, I know that you have had a long association with the international NGO called StrongMinds, which is a great name, isn't it, by the way? So you've had a very good relationship with that, and you are part of, or you are responsible for the Innovation Hub. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And so, do tell me a little bit more about your work at Strong Minds. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so it gives me so much honor to actually talk about Strong Minds and the work that is done at Strong Minds, because I first met Sean in
Now,
2013.
right. Now, you say the name Sean. So for those of us who are in the field of mental health, we know who you mean. You mean Sean
Yeah,
Mabry, don't you?
yeah, I mean Sean Mabry, who's the CEO for Strong Minds and the founder for Strong
Yeah,
Minds.
he's the founder.
Yeah, yes, I met him in 2013. Actually, he came to Uganda and he had this vision to start treating individuals with mental health. And I was one of the people, the pioneers to be trained with Strong Minds to learn how to do interpersonal psychotherapy for groups. And I later on met Sean in New York, and we talked about the prospects, and we've kept in touch since then. I would be called in to do some training work, consultancy work with them until that point when they were thinking about the innovations lab and they needed an expert,
Right.
someone who understands the nitty-gritty of testing things and stuff like that at Strong Minds. So my involvement with Strong Minds has a long history going back 2013 when he only had 5 staff.
Right.
And now they've grown so much.
Yes,
It's
they're
a
a big organization now. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So it's a big organization. And the Innovations Lab in the field of mental health is responsible for ensuring that Strong Minds does not become a one-trick pony, and they don't become so comfortable with what they did and it should be that and it will always be that. So we test, we
Right.
look at the data, and we test the interventions, the processes, and the general operations. We are responsible for becoming aware and creating that awareness in the organization of how other people who are in the field of mental health, people who are treating depression, are approaching depression. It's my responsibility to be on top of the most recent, up-to-date information to make sure that it's documented, and also providing strategies on how we can tap into it, replicate it, or even learn, from that.
Yeah.
We recently were able to test interpersonal psychotherapy for groups, which is an approach that is used to treat depression. And Strong Minds is known for using IPT. I don't think there's anyone in the world who has treated more people using that approach than Strong Minds. And what we did, because Strong Minds started from offering people 16 sessions.
Right.
And that was heavy lifting, because sometimes people were just being dragged into sessions, as you can imagine, staying true to the exactly. So, and they've been moving, and recently, we were able to test 6 sessions, and tweaking certain things within the tasks of each session. And we carried out a randomized controlled trial for that, and it was very successful. And we keep on learning, because the Innovations Lab is very, very open. It requires someone who's open-minded, very flexible, and curious.
Yes.
So if you told me on this podcast that there's someone somewhere in Bristol who's treating depression using a very, very unorthodox formula, I would be very curious. I would want to meet them, spend time with them, and go back and tell folks at Strong Minds that this person is doing this. Can we replicate it? Can we test it in our setting?
Indeed.
So the Innovations Lab is your chef in the kitchen with different cuisines, trying out different things and going to the people and honestly asking them, can this work? Do you like the test? Are we getting the results?
So you're a kind of funny mixture of on the one hand, you're a kind of needle in the side of people at Strong Minds to make sure that they keep doing the work well. So there's an evaluation.
Yeah.
there's a kind of evaluative quality there. And then on the
Yeah.
other hand, you are, of course, bringing in new ideas and helping them to field test the new ideas as and when they fit. Yeah. Tell me just a little bit more about the Strong Minds approach. Am I right in thinking it's aimed entirely at women, or is it aimed at both genders?
It is aimed at both genders, but when you think about the history of Strong Minds operations, I think even with the myth, because it was always sort of like the propaganda that men don't show up to, don't get depressed, and if they get depressed, they wouldn't come for
Right.
treatment. But that's sort of like that has been demystified, because Strong Minds actually every year we see more men show up.
Well, that's interesting.
Every year, not more men than women, but the number of men in our treatments increases.
Right.
And we know that when men decide to go into therapy and they commit to it, the retention rates are higher, so they don't drop out.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so I would say that the vision is to treat depression and end the epidemic of depression in Africa, and both men and women, boys and girls are targeted and treated by Strong Minds. Yeah.
So do you think particularly as you reduce the through scientific approach, as you reduce the number of sessions, as you said earlier, for example, from in the early days 16 sessions and now coming down to a lower number of sessions, do you think the facilitator who is actually managing that group, do you think they have to be more skilled at each session, or how do you view that kind of skill? Because it seems to me very important somehow.
I think I have to take you up on that in terms of skill.
Mm-hmm.
All the people that we have, the facilitators as we call them, they're well trained.
Good.
So over time, it became very clear that after the fourth session, the turn up becomes very difficult, what I would call a struggle to show up. And we think about the best use of our time. So if you expect someone to show up 10 times, and after the third session, they've been missing 2 or 3 or 1, and then at termination, they're not showing up, we got to make a decision. And of course, the facilitators always have refresher trainings to sort of like update them, and they go through quality assessment and all that. One of the things that I would say is we actually look at the data and we let the data guide us. And we are thinking that as far as mental health access and the treatment of depression, specifically in Uganda, and I would love to say maybe in Africa, there are more people that go untreated, and God knows what happens to them, than the ones that actually access our services. So we are thinking more about, should we at least be trying to reach more people, or spend 4 more sessions on someone who clearly feels much better and they're functioning way better, or take those 4 sessions and give them to someone who's desperate for treatment?
Got it.
And the decision is always easy when you look at the data.
Right.
What I would like to say is, ever since Strong Minds moved to 6 sessions, we haven't even registered over 100 people requesting for more sessions. And we've made it very clear that if our clients voice that they need more sessions, the facilitator has that flexibility to give them additional sessions.
Right.
It's just that it's not happening. So when we move to 6 sessions, some people would argue that you're diluting it. Yet we are open to listening to the recipients of our services. If they say along the way, or if the measures that we use are clearly indicating that this person is still unwell, the facilitator has the permission to say, listen, supervisor, my clients are not getting better, so I'm going to go back to what we used to do, 8 sessions or 10 sessions. They have the right to do that. We just don't have people coming back.
Right. So it
After
hasn't
the
been
6
necessary.
sessions.
Yes.
It
Yes.
hasn't been necessary at all.
Yeah. And your own research demonstrates that. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Rosco, we're coming to the end of our time, unfortunately, because I could listen to you talk about this for many more hours to come. Um, uh, I was just thinking, Strong Minds, of course, has a website, and if people are interested in that, am I right in thinking it's strongminds.org? Is that correct?
Yes, strongminds.org, you're correct.
Yeah, that's great. So people want to have a look at that, and it's well worth having a look at. So that would be something. And if people have questions that they want to ask you, maybe about one of the courses that you run, if one of the listeners of our program is from Uganda itself and wants to come and study with you, what would be the best way of getting in touch?
I mean, they could just Google me or reach out to me, my email,
You wouldn't mind that? Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. No, I
Okay.
wouldn't mind with
All
that.
right, that's fine. So we'll make sure that if you don't mind, we'll make sure your email is available in the notes to the podcast. That'd be fine.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, we're coming to the end, as I said. And much of your work, including your experience at the beginning with the stories that you shared, for which we're very grateful, by the way, and of course your work since has of course been in this field of mental health. When I see you talking about mental health, I often see you smiling, and that makes me think that you must get real enjoyment out of this field. I just wondered whether that was true, and what is it that so excites you and makes you passionate about the field?
Well, a lot of things for me as an individual, as a human being, I think being in this field of mental health has been rewarding, enriching, because I think that I use the services more than other people. I I learn a lot. I've grown so much as a person, but also it's such an amazing and powerful gift for you to be involved in, touching human souls directly, because I see families really scared. They ask me, whether their loved ones are gonna recover, and there's real fear. So it's almost like being able to hold someone's hand when they're going through a storm and assuring them time and time again that I'm not gonna leave you, and they breathe and you see them breathing until they get to the other side. It's not always possible. Some conditions, it's very difficult. Even with depression, it's very difficult. But more times, people become depression free and they learn how to look after themselves, recognize, when they're about to relapse and seek services again. And every day, whether it's an adolescent or an older person, it's very rewarding for me to see the difference before they joined our groups and afterwards. And people tell you this work is very important. Thank you so much. When I read the stories, the testimonies, and I see the numbers of people who have been freed from depression, I feel so honored. I'm so grateful that I'm in this field and even involved with Strong Minds, because I think it's very, very important work. And then to be placed in the Innovation Hub, I'd love to think of myself as one of the few people in the world constantly thinking about a treatment for depression, finding that cure, finding that, whatever it is that will help people get better. And I'm grateful that that's why I smile when I talk about this, because if you asked me a few years ago if I would be in this position, I wouldn't give you an answer. So that's why I smile about it.
Oh, that's wonderful. What a wonderful way to finish. I have this wonderful picture of you holding someone's hand as they go through a storm. It's a great way to finish. Rosco, we want to thank you so much for taking part in the podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris.